Yeah, I think there's two pieces here. So the first is kind of the mechanics of the game itself and how those mechanics have kind of devolved into a Ponzi scheme. And, we could argue whether that was the original intention or not, but it seems like these days, even the developers of the game kind of in hushed tones will kind of admit as much. And then the other aspect of this is just how this is kind of a microcosm of Web3, is that a lot of these things purport to be decentralized. The in-game tokens are NFTs, you can trade them, you own them and all this. But when you look at the actual implications of that on the users, it's still very centralized because the game ultimately can block one of these tokens or that sort of thing.
Paul, I understand your criticisms. They're well laid out, but I have to wonder, is this system, while flawed, still better than the ones that came before it in Web 2? I guess I'm wondering if we're still in sort of the Netscape phase of Web 3 and that at least something like Axie is a step in the right direction. Even if it is flawed, it's going to take time to perfect it.
I think there are, Web3 kind of came up on these very valid criticisms of how the web is very centralized in all of this. And I think there's certainly validity to that. Where I think there's a disconnect is the solutions that are posed that are kind of part of this Web3 package. And, Web3 is a nebulous term, so it's kind of arguable what's in that. But it typically, includes blockchain as kind of one of the core technologies. And there are people working on kind of solving this problem of centralization and doing what I see as very real work outside of kind of the blockchain world. There's a firm called Ink and Switch that I think is doing great work here. You'll never hear them use Web3 or blockchain. Where I think like the Web3 people come in is they see the blockchain profit motive here, but they're actually not really solving the problem.
One of my criticisms of kind of all games lately, blockchain or not, is that they all tend to involve an enormous amount of grinding and financialization. At least this one pays you for grinding, but the game itself doesn't seem fun. I'm wondering, do you see that trend as actually a good one? It's going to actually reward you for grinding in the game, as opposed to trying to extract money from you like a Candy Crush whale or something.
So the challenge is where that money comes from. And so, the game developers are not just benevolently paying out people to play this game. The money comes from inflows of new players who have to put up hundreds or in some cases thousands of dollars to start playing the game. So that's why what I see in this is kind of a Ponzi scheme with a layer of deniability where they can say, oh, some people have put in more than they've taken out, but those people are, doing it for the love of the game. But when you peel back the covers, there's just nobody out there doing it for the love of the game, or it's a very, tiny piece of the pie, and most users are in it because they want to make more out of it in the long run, which of course just mathematically doesn't work.
Paul, there's been a lot of coverage of how in the Philippines specifically, some of the players of Axie are using the income streams from the game to pay bills in the real world. And on one side, you have play to earn, but I'm wondering, on the other side, you also have someone who is playing to lose. And while you have examples like the Philippines that are positive examples, do you think that this is a net benefit or net detractor from the real world economy? And what happens to those people who are playing and losing on the other side?
I think when you hear the story about the Philippines, it's obviously a very feel-good story, but underneath the coverage, it's kind of a PR play from some affiliated parties of the game itself. So, there's obviously for each dollar coming in, the Philippines is the biggest growth market of this game. That means that all these players putting money in to play this are also largely based in the Philippines. So, the numbers aren't public, so we don't know exactly for sure, but just from first principles, we know that, for every dollar coming into the game, there's a dollar going out. So, you can make assumptions that a lot of that money is actually coming in from the Philippines, and we're really just seeing wealth reshuffled rather than created.